What do you think about Sam Sulek? Have you seen him? He's been blowing up.
I've only seen what other people have said about it.
Okay.
From my understanding, he's a young guy who's taken a lot of steroids. And
I don't know if he's taking a lot. I mean,
okay,
I have no idea. He's f***ing jacked and he's young and he's fucking blowing the fuck up because he posts like what to me is what people posted like 10 years ago, which is funny how things come back and all back to cycles where it's like everyone got tired of the hurrah, look at this nice edit and all this shit. And it's just like this guy's like tripod, look at me work really fucking hard and take this shit real serious.
Okay.
So do I know about his steroid usage? I don't.
Okay.
I'd love to talk to him about it, but like, yeah, you see what people say, right? They're assuming because of, I think, his development at such a young age.
Yeah.
That he,
my apologies then, Sam.
I don't know.
I'm just reading from what other people say, right?
I'm certain he takes steroids. I don't know to what degree he takes them.
Right.
But you know, it's the thing's interesting. Like his popularity is really interesting to me as far as like how fast it like went from 0 to like millions.
Yeah.
Because of the content he makes.
Well, and that's I will tell you, that's a whole nother issue wrapped up there. This is going to sound weird. I kind of feel bad for him. Because can you imagine getting the kind of popularity you have now at like age 18 or 19 or something like that?
It'd be insane.
Yeah, like I'm really glad that this has actually been a slow climb for me. Because typically when young kids get a lot of popularity and money, it does not end very well. Because you just don't have the maturity to be able to handle that shit at such a young age, you know?
You know, I talked to him on the phone. Apparently he's going to school to get like an engineering degree. This guy's super smart.
Great. And I hope he's got, smart people in his ear. Cause like so much, like it's so hard to like stay centered. But what I mean by that is, hey, I've been guilty of reading my own hype and being like, yeah, like I'm the man,
Yeah.
And I've also been guilty of reading the negative shit and going, fuck, maybe I am a piece of shit, like,
oh yeah.
And so I think like over time I've gotten better about like, all right, I need to be careful of how much of my hype I read. I need to be careful about how much of my negative stuff I believe, and I think that just comes with time and experience. But when you're young, like you can take stuff so personal.
You're still learning.
You're still learning. You're still, man, like sometimes I'm like, I don't really think like I even got close to emotionally maturing until I got in my like mid 30s, and just thinking about like, I was like just a totally random different thing, but I'm like thinking about people who have kids when they're like 18 years old, like have a baby or something like that. I'm like, oh my God.
I couldn't imagine.
I cannot imagine because I have 2 kids and I know how fucking hard it was for me and I felt like I was ready, So yeah, I would just like, hopefully he's got some like, good support and
seems like he does.
That's good.
Yeah.
It's kind of like,
he also seems to be like a very like lone wolf. Like I don't see him doing a lot of stuff with many people.
Well, and I think
that's part of his allure though too.
I mean, that's good. I mean, you just got to be, it's funny because, you hear these kind of like touts or kind of cliche things of like, it's lonely at the top or, people will try to use you for different stuff. And I was like, yeah. And then it happened,
Oh yeah.
And it's like,
I've been there.
Yeah. And it's like, that's one of the things now is it's like, I have a tendency that like, I'll make friends too quick. You know what I mean? Like I'll be like, oh, they're really nice and cool. And then thankfully now I have people in my life who are like, that act as my filter, who are much more discerning. Cause I kind of like everybody, like when I meet them and hang out,
Yeah.
But it got me in trouble quite a bit. Cause it's like, not everybody has your best interest at heart. And I don't even think it's necessarily like a nefarious thing all the time. It's just like, if you bring somebody into your circle and they're getting certain things from it, if that goes away at some point, they're like, hey, that guy's not my friend anymore. And then you're left like, well, hang on. I thought we were friends because of a connection we have and like, showing up for each other in terms of like listening and giving advice and all. But you were just wanting this thing, And so I don't necessarily think it's a nefarious thing. There are people who are definitely nefarious and clout chasers for sure.
Right.
But yeah, it's one of those things where I tell people like, I like my life. I wouldn't trade it, but there's ups and downs. There's trade-offs. There's no solutions, only trade-offs. So I guess for this kid, like, hey man, just be careful and go slow.
Yeah.
Like if you're blowing up, say no to more stuff than you say yes to. That would be the first thing I would say. Like saying yes to too much shit will get you in a world of trouble real quick.
Yeah. Yeah. That was one of my biggest issues that I had going through it all was like, you think that everyone's going to have the same sort of like good in them that you have in you. You know what I'm saying?
But
like
we view other people through the prism of our own lens. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things people really struggle with, I don't know if empathy is the right word, but you have to understand that not everybody has the same life experiences as you or the same upbringing or whatever. And like, I remember I've been around people who are very like, and somebody close to me who was like, it seemed like every person around them, they're like, well, what are they trying to get out of it? Or they're trying to do this to me or this. I'm like, what have they done that would make you think that? It's like, then they ended up kind of being a crappy person themselves. And like, oh, you think that because that's what you're doing, right? Like that's your prism. Whereas like, typically people who are happier and a little more trusting, not saying all the time, there's always, outliers and exceptions, but for the most part, people who have like a default, like greater happy setting, usually had a better upbringing. They trust people more, because they also are not trying to like screw people over. So, I mean, that's one of the things, I don't want to say fame because it's just fitness fame, Yeah. But kind of taught me is like, not everybody has the same perspective, right?
What have you dealt with personally like that you're speaking to?
I mean,
that you're comfortable sharing, obviously.
Yeah. So I think one of them would be like, I started a company about 7 years ago called Avatar Nutrition that it was a website. It's similar to my app Carbon Diet Coach, which is basically like an algorithm-based coaching app. It's done great. But Avatar was a website, but essentially it was algorithm-based coaching. And, it got really successful. Like we had, I think at the peak, when I was kicked out of the company, we had 26,000 members. And originally it was me and another guy. We had 50-50 ownership. And then we brought in a registered dietitian because I thought it was important to have a registered dietitian. And she did do a lot of work for the company and was very critical. And the other person was like, hey, like we should give her some equity. Like, she's done a lot of work. So we both gave up 10%. Well, then those two formed a personal relationship. And so they had 60% of the company and, they had their reasons. Like I think they became resentful of me because I was the face, even though they were kind of doing the day-to-day grunt work. Right. And
but that's how shit works though.
I was, cause I'm looking at this, like, isn't it more important that I'm like bringing people into this, and I think when we did statistics, it was something like we did a branding experiment. It was like 70% of people were like brought to it by like directly by me. And it's probably higher than that. Cause, people also listed like social media as a way they found it. Well, what social media do you think they found it through? Right.
Right.
So anyways, I walk into what I think is a meeting one day and there's an attorney there and they're like, you're out. And it was at the same time I was going through a personal divorce and their justification was, that I had violated my fiduciary duty to the company, which is a very nebulous term in Florida law. But basically they were claiming that I was in competition with them because of my previous, my company I've had for 15 years, BioLane, which is my coaching company. And before I even started working on Avatar, I'd started working on like what we call a workout builder, which we still have, which is kind of like different workout programs on our website that are template based. They're not algorithm based, but it is like somewhat flexible and modifiable. And it's done well for us and people love it. But they were saying that was in competition with what they were doing, even though they didn't have any training portion to their, website. And I had been working on it from before I even started with them. And then they actually sued me for that. But it was all, okay, my opinion was the lawsuit was kind of just a kind of a bully tactic
to get way out.
Because the negotiation would start with, well, here's what we'll give you for your shares and we'll drop the lawsuit. And I was kind of like, no,
we're just pushing you out.
Pay me what my shares are worth. And then if you still feel like suing me, go ahead. Right.
Yeah.
But that was all during the time where I was going through my first divorce. I had like injured my back. I mean, it was a very rough time. And like, it got to the point where, I mean, like net worth wise, I was okay. But like I owed more money to attorneys than I could write a check for at the time.
Yeah.
It was scary as fuck. And, not to get too technical, but essentially my attorneys outmaneuvered their attorneys and I just had the facts on my side and, ended up getting a fair buyout for my shares and they dropped the lawsuit and, I mean, they're still around to this day and no, like, hey, I'm like sincerely not mad about it. Because I don't think it was like their intention was to come in and eventually do this and kick me out. I think it, kind of boiled down to a lack of communication. They had certain expectations that weren't communicated. I had certain expectations that weren't communicated. That's why kind of any relationship breaks down, right?
Yeah.
So, and it led me into other things that have been like way better. So I'm not mad at all about it. But it was kind of that first experience of like, but I thought you guys were my friends. Like I thought you guys like had my back, And, it was a pretty rough time.